Yeah, so it's not your traditional investment. It's not the kind of financial investment that's designed to yield you a return. The biggest return on an EB5 investment is going to be your ability to live here, work here, have the kids study here, and things of that nature. So it's really a green card program. It's not a money-making program, unfortunately.
Now, when I talk about the entire ecosystem and if I talk about the market, there is rising global debt on one side, there is rising right wing activism on one side, where every country wants to protect its own citizens. And of course, there are multiple markets now. It is not just US today in today's day and age. From an investor standpoint, how should I see these multiple scenarios?
Long term, I think US is still going to be a very desired, destination for investments, for education, for advancement, and for opportunities.
Hello and welcome to Why Not Mint Money, your go to podcast for smart financial decisions because who doesn't want to mint money? Today, ladies and gentlemen, we are diving into a unique investment tool. No, not the stocks, not the mutual funds, but something which is less spoken about. We're talking about the EB5 Visa, which is an investment tool. Now, we have with us Vivek Tandon, who is an MD of Sequence Financial Specialist. He will let us deep dive into this investment tool. This program lets you invest in the US economy and in return potentially secure a green card. But of course, like every investment tool, it comes with its own risks and set of assessments. Vivek, thank you so much for joining us on Why Not Mint Money. Do you like to mint money, by the way?
Yes, absolutely. Who doesn't? And thanks, Rabinav, for this opportunity to come here and speak with you.
Pleasure is all mine, but we can make that mutual. So let's start. So Vivek, let us know what is an EB5 visa from the basics of it. What does it do, and yeah, the ecosystem of it primarily.
Sure, absolutely. So the EB5 Investor Visa program was actually put into place through an act of the US Congress back in 1990. And then back in March of 2022, it was actually reactivated by the Biden administration. So it's been in effect for the last, 30 plus years. It took a little bit of a break, back in 2021, so they could sort of go back to the drawing board and sort of redraw or reform the EB5 program. And that's when, in March of 2022, President Biden signed another act of Congress into law called the Reform and Integrity Act of 2022. And at that time, the EB5 program was redefined. The investment amount initially, back in the days, used to be $500,000. And the obligation on the investor would be to invest that 500,000 into a new business or a new project in the US, create 10 full-time jobs, and on that basis, they would get a temporary green card initially, and then a permanent green card down the road. So in 2022, that amount was revised to $800,000. So as it stands, as of today's date, you have to invest $800,000 either into a rural area or an area that is experiencing high unemployment. Either way, when you invest that 800K, it can go into a new business or a new development project. You still have to create those 10 full-time jobs for US workers. And again, on that basis, you would get a conditional green card initially and an unconditional green card down the road.
Sure. Now, but if I compare it to other investment tools of investing in the US, how does it differentiate, and why should an investor go for this option as compared to the others?
Yeah, so it's not your traditional investment. It's not the kind of financial investment that's designed to yield you a return. The biggest return on an EB5 investment is going to be your ability to live here, work here, have the kids study here, and things of that nature. So it's really a green card program. It's not a money-making program, unfortunately. Down the road, yes, you will have plenty of opportunities and abilities to mint money. In fact, we do EB5 for a lot of couples that are already in the US on H-1B visa, settled out in Silicon Valley. But unfortunately, while they have everything else, they'll have, wonderful kids, a house, a car, all of those good things. What we'll be missing is a green card. So now that they've, been in the country 5, 7, perhaps even 10, 12 years, with no green card in sight through their employer, because H-1B to something called EB-2 and EB-3 categories are highly, highly backlogged to the extent that it might take you 30 or 40 years to get a green card through those two categories. So if they have enough savings, enough RSUs and things of that nature, then they'll set aside 800K to make an EB5 investment. And now they get the ability to speak up, which was missing before because they were employer dependent and they were sponsored by their employers. And then they're in a better position to negotiate better pay, better advancement opportunities. And if they feel like they're not being heard at their current employers, they can leave altogether and work wherever they like, because EB5 is a great equalizer. It levels the playing field. It opens up so many new doors for these couples that are already here doing good work. And of course, that's just one aspect of EB5, or one target market for EB5, the H-1B crowd in the US. The other crowd is, the F1 international student crowd that comes out of India, spends their formative years in the US between the ages of 18 and 25, doing their bachelor's degrees, doing their master's degrees. Most of them are not looking to return to India. So to get them permanency, their parents will sponsor their EB5 investment. And then on that basis, again, they would get the ability to, live and work in the US without having to depend on a future employer, without having to depend on the H-1B lottery, without having to go for something called OPT, which is literally a 1-year temporary work permit that you get if you were to be educated in the US.
Sure, but Vivek, in the current scenario, excuse me, in the current scenario, I don't think any discussion on immigration will be incomplete without mentioning Donald Trump, the US president, the current US president. There is a lot of uncertainty in immigration rules. New rules are being introduced every day. And sometimes what happens is that we have seen how things have played out in the last 6 months. There has been tariff war, there has been trade uncertainty, and of course, people uncertainty, for the lack of a better word. In the current scenario, how do you see this investment tool panning out? Because everybody has one concern right now, which is Donald Trump. So, how do you see things playing out in this geopolitical environment where anything can happen anytime?
So fortunately, the Trump administration has not specifically targeted EB5. Their targets right now are folks that are in this country unlawfully, that basically cross the border, illegally, and stay back and work here and do all those kinds of things. So there's absolutely a lot of talk about, immigration into the US, but I think we just need to qualify that to say, illegal immigration. And of course, there's politics around it, there's geopolitics around it, there's economics around it, and those are, sort of issues that the current administration is looking to deal with. Of course, you hear about it so much in the news, all these immigration raids happening, like the one that just recently happened at an auto plant in the state of Georgia and Atlanta, where Hyundai had, I think 400 or 500 workers there, and apparently 300 of them are going to be sent back. And of course, that creates a lot of, tension between countries and their relationships and whatnot. But I think, like I said, we just need to qualify that immigration piece to add that, unlawful presence, illegal immigration to it. Has he targeted legal immigration per se? Not exactly, but he has definitely made things more tougher. Scrutiny is at the highest level ever. Whether it's EB5 or not, especially the H-1B crowd, they're scrutinizing that more and more because they want to make sure that, the H-1B crowd in the US is not replacing US workers for those roles and for those jobs. And that's actually led to an increase in interest for EB5. So ever since, EB5 took effect again back in March of 2022, the demand's been through the roof, because one of the sort of game-changing features of what we call the new EB5 program is that for those that are already in the US and proper legal status, could be F1, could be L1, could be H1B, what have you, they actually don't have to go through something called consulate processing, which is what applicants who are residing outside of the US have to do. So they have to wait a few years before they'll get the ability to live and work in the US. Whereas folks such as the couples that are talking about in Silicon Valley, they're already here on H-1B. So what they're able to now do is make that $800,000 investment, file their EB-5 application. Along with that EB-5 application, file for something called adjustment of status. And when you file those two applications together, you actually get a work and travel permit in about 4 to 6 months. Usually comes in the form of a combo card, happens to be pink in color, so it's not exactly green, but happens to be pink in color. The top says employment authorization, the bottom says advanced parole, which is just legal word for travel documentation and travel authorization. And when you have this pink card, it's valid for 5 years, it's extendable beyond five if you need it, then effectively the rights, privileges, and benefits that you were going to get through a green card are given to you in a matter of 6 months or less. The green card itself might still take 2 or 3 years to come through, depending on the processing times and depending on whether there's any visa backlog for India-born applicants or China-born applicants, because those are the two countries that traditionally experience backlogs in pretty much every visa category. As of today's date, there's no backlog for EB-5 for both Chinese and Indians in rural investments or urban area investments. But because of that game-changing feature, there's now been like 8,000 perhaps applications in the last 2.5, 3 years that the program's come back, and that translates into billions and billions of dollars, thousands and thousands of jobs for U.S. workers, and especially in the most needed areas. We've been funding a lot of rural area deals recently. Traditionally, these rural area projects do not get a lot of investments and financing from EB5 or even outside of EB5. So now EB5's become this, real enabler for these businesses to take off, for these projects to take off, whether it's hospitality, whether it's housing, whether it's manufacturing, you name it.
Okay. But Vivek, we are talking about the financial world, and there's a very important word in financial world. It's called leverage. Okay, you're talking about
Right.
investment of $800,000. Now, if I see it from an investor perspective, an investor expects an ROI, and when I talk about ROI, I mean, is there an asset liability question here? I mean, if you're talking about the mindset which goes behind such an investment, what would that mindset be, and what is the leverage here? Because considering, I'll be realistic with you, and we're both realistic people, and you're yourself running a business, so I expect you will also have a similar mindset. What is a risk reward ratio? What is the risk reward equation here? Because considering the global uncertainties, that is paramount. So if I talk about the financial mindset here, how do you want to address that part of the risk here?
Sure, absolutely. In fact, EB5 requires this to be an at-risk investment. Okay, so these are not risk-free investments. These are your regular old investments that carry risk. What we're looking to do is to identify opportunities, projects where that risk is as low as possible, as mitigated as possible. Okay. What is the reward? The reward is, again, that ability to live, work, study in the US, but there's not like a financial reward as such. Why? Because EB5 is designed to be a cheaper source of capital for these borrowers, these end users, these developers, to help them, help them build something in the US. So if the EB5 money that they're borrowing from something called a regional center, and there's hundreds of these out there in the market. And basically, a regional center is a private business that is licensed by the US government to act as an intermediary between EB5 investors that want a green card and generally a developer in the US that is looking for money to build something. But when they make their loans, a good, credible regional center will generally be much lower than, say, a construction loan from a JP Morgan Chase or a Goldman Sachs, which could easily run into double digits in terms of the annual interest that these guys will be charging the borrower. EB5 money is usually borrowed at between 6 to 8%. So there's substantial cost savings for these borrowers when they borrow EB5 money versus traditional capital, from the credit markets in the US. Does it carry risk? Absolutely, it does carry risk. The only way to really, minimize or perhaps mitigate that risk is proper due diligence. So, we're a FINRA registered broker dealer. So just like, you have SEBI in India, we have SEC and FINRA in the US. So SEC, Securities and Exchange Commission, FINRA is Financial Industry Regulatory Authority. So unlike the regional centers, we're highly regulated as an investment bank, which generally means three things for our investors. Number one is we have fiduciary duties to the investor to make sure their financial interests are well protected. Two, we have a duty of due diligence after these, EB5 projects in the market to make sure that they make a lot of sense sense to us from a financial and compliance perspective. And then finally, we're regulated by SEC. So regulation best interest applies to us, which means we have a whole host of obligations and duties towards our investors when we make an investment recommendation to them. Now, does it guarantee an outcome? Does it guarantee anything? Absolutely not. It's still an at-risk investment at the end of the day. But this creates an option. Okay, like I said, the H-1B crowd in the US now, it's the missing piece of the puzzle is their permanent residency. So they get to plug in that missing piece. The F1 visa crowd, the international student crowd, their parents get that sort of peace of mind that not only are their kids going to be able to study in the US, but then beyond F1, beyond studying, they're going to be able to pursue the kinds of opportunities that they want to pursue. So that's sort of the reward at the end of the day for people who are making this substantial investment.
Sure. Now, let's talk about the market a little bit, Vivek. We have heard how Golden Visa from Dubai was in the news a couple of days ago. We have heard similar programs in Europe, UK especially. And when I say Europe, I primarily imply Germany. My point being, this is a market where citizens from countries like India, South Africa, Brazil, they are targeted for in the hope of a better lifestyle, better education, better exposure for their families and their future families. Now, when I talk about the entire ecosystem, and if I talk about the market, there is rising global debt on one side. There is rising right-wing activism on one side. Where every country wants to protect its own citizens, and of course, there are multiple markets now. It is not just US today in today's day and age. From an investor standpoint, how should I see these multiple scenarios? I mean, I would like you to address this question not as the CEO of where you belong, but as an investor. I mean, how should I be able to see everything in an unbiased fashion and then make a sound investment decision?
So I think you have to have a short-term view and a long-term view. So in the short run, there's a lot of upheaval around the world right now, politically, geopolitically, economically, tariff-wise, trade-wise. But the key is to really focus on, the long term, right? What are the long-term prospects for me and my family if I were to move to Dubai, if I were to move to Singapore, if I were to move to Australia or UK or European Union or US or Canada. So I think at the end of the day, US seems to be the ultimate destination because we do a lot of EB-5 for Canadians, for people who are settled in Dubai, for people who are settled in Singapore, because once they've left India or their kids have left India, of course, they have very strong ties. I mean, my family left India in 1990s. I'm 47 now. I was 14 years old when I came to this country, but I have very strong ties to India. I come to India 4 times a year, and I spend a lot of time there. I have a 3-year-old. He's already been to India 3 times in 3 years. Okay, so the ties never go away. Economically, religiously, culturally, patriotically, you name it. It's just that now you're sort of the bridge between all of those countries. If you're in Dubai, you're the bridge between Dubai and India. If you're in Singapore, you're a bridge between Singapore and India. And as you can see, the Indian American population in the US, we're about 5 million out of the 350 odd million people. So we're only 1.5% of the US population, but very visible, for the most part, influential, growing in economically and culturally and everything. Yet we maintain very strong ties with India for the most part. And I think US-India relations are a reflection of that. And that's come through in the last 30, 40, 50 years. It did not happen overnight. So yes, I think right now, perhaps US and India, to an extent, are going through some difficult times in terms of figuring out where each country wants to be, trade-wise, economy-wise, and tariffs-wise, and all these other, buzzwords out there. But I think long term, it's still going to be a very strong relationship. Long term, I think US is still going to be a very desired, destination for investments, for education, for advancement, and for opportunities.
Sure. Now, let me ask something completely off the track. For how long were you in India before moving to the US?
I was only 14 years old.
So, up till 14, you were in India, if I make an assessment.
Correct.
So, did you
Yeah,
play cricket when you were a child?
I did. I still do.
So, do you think it's your moral responsibility to promote cricket in the United States and make sure that we have an American team participating in the World Cup coming soon?
I don't know if I have a moral responsibility, but when we do play cricket out here, people want to be involved and they're curious and they want to learn. So again, it's all about building bridges. I think at the end of the day,
I'll tell you.
creating that. Yeah.
I'll tell you why I'm asking this question, because whenever there's we go to matches and there's always this discussion, when will we have an American cricket team? So I sometimes feel that all the Indians who have immigrated to the US, it becomes their sort of social and moral obligation, of course, on the lighter side, to promote cricket. And we will very soon have, because if we see American cricket team participating in the World Cup, I think these discussions will be more fluid going
Well, we
forward.
did. We did have an American cricket team. It was mostly Indians, but we still, but again, so we have a dual identity, right? We're Indian Americans. So you can call us American, you can call us Indian. We call ourselves Indian American. So when you saw the U.S. cricket team, in the last World Cup, I mean, those are U.S. people. They live here, they work here, their lives are here, their kids are here, all of those good things.
Okay, so now coming back to the last part of the conversation, what are the risks associated with the EB5 visa, and what should an investor consider? I mean, what should be the risk factor which he or she should consider before making an investment? Any precautions he or she should adhere to?
So, most EB5 projects are focused on construction or something to do with real estate because that's what ends up creating the most jobs. And to the US government, this is a job creation program. To the investor, it might be a green card program, but to the government, it's a job creation program, and it's bringing in dollars into the U.S. and of course bringing a lot of wealthy families and wealthy individuals to the U.S. Right? Uh, but when you look at it from that perspective, if you're investing in real estate, whether it's housing, whether it's hospitality, whether it's a manufacturing plant, whether it's green, clean energy, any number of these, projects, right? Uh, what is the value that piece of real estate, brings to the table? So, and that value can only be there if it gets through the business plan that it's supposed to get through. So when we're assessing projects, for risk, we're looking at it from three lenses. One is construction risk, two is financing risk, and three is revenue risk. As much as we'd like to say that everything's going to go as planned and projected, things don't always go as planned and projected. We just have to make sure that they have enough, safety nets in place. I'm talking about the regional centers. I'm talking about these borrowers slash developers who are using this money, and spending the money to create those jobs. Then I think we can be in a good position. Um, there's sort of this age-old mantra that we tend to follow at our firm. We just stick with the tried and tested players and tried and tested models. There's little or no experimentation when it comes to EB5. As it is, investments are speculative in nature. So we never want to be overly speculative because we're not trying to make money. We're trying to get a green card. We're trying to preserve our initial invested capital. And as I said, the ROI on EB5 will come to you once you have the ability to live and work in the US completely freely without any dependency on, government policies or employers or what have you. But you have to wait for that. Okay. So for now, though, the focus just ought to be mitigating that risk. And again, looking at each project from those three particular lenses and then either ruling them in or ruling them out, and always work with, of course, professionals in the field, people who are licensed, experienced, regulated. That should go without saying. This is a huge amount of money. It's usually life savings for a lot of people. It's a big decision. It's a life-changing decision. So, and you only get to really make it once. You really only get one shot at it. So you want to make sure you do it right.
In investment ads in India, also, although it's a very ghisa pita line, for the lack of the better word, and it's done and dusted, but they say it at the end of every investment ad. It's like, read all the investment documents carefully. So if there is one
Yeah.
line you would have to say something similar about EB5, when the commercial has ended, what would that line be?
Past performance does not guarantee future outcome. So for each individual opportunity, assess them on their own merits as they stand today. What they may have done in the past, what they might be doing in the future, it's relevant, but just a small aspect of that is relevant to what you're considering today. So I would just focus on the opportunity at hand. And again, work with professionals in this field. There's enough people like us. There's enough, immigration lawyers out there that can help you do due diligence on the legal side, on the immigration side. We help people do due diligence on the financial side, on the compliance side. And again, go back to that sort of mantra that I was talking about, or going back to that mantra that I was talking about, stick with the tried and tested players and tried and tested models, and you should be fine.
Sure, Vivek, thank you so much for your time. This was really insightful, and I hope all the viewers of Mint Money can get a sense of what is it like to invest, and any precautionary closing remarks from you. I mean, because there have been cases where there has we have seen how fake agents contact people. There have been a lot of phishing and faking around. So yeah, that would be my last question actually. How to identify fake players, because there have been a lot of scams in this area. I mean, any precautionary word from you over there in that aspect?
Yeah, so in fact, the new EB-5 program was put back into effect through the Reform and Integrity Act of 2022. So they wanted
Okay.
to reform the program because it had a lot of shortcomings, and they wanted to introduce a lot of integrity measures because there was a lot of questionable practices, questionable actors. Just like any other industry, EB-5 had its fair share of bad actors. So the government basically now regulates a lot of that. There's, project site visits, there's regional center audits, and they do require, foreign agents to register with USCIS. I don't think, and of course I'm biased when I say this, I don't think that's a replacement for being regulated by SEC and FINRA. Because, when they audit us, when they question us, when they review our marketing materials, when they review our practices, my WhatsApp is archived, my emails are archived, they're reviewed on a periodic basis. There's a lot of checks and balances for who and what, for the investor and for their protection. So when you deal with, say, salespeople that are sitting, in a foreign country advising you on an investment that's not in the country where they're sitting and you're sitting, it's in the US, just be very careful. It's just like if I want to buy something on Golf Course Road in Gurgaon, I'm going to go to some, reputable broker in Gurgaon. I'm not going to go to somebody here in Los Angeles and say, hey, tell me about this particular flat or this particular property or this particular developer who's developing, properties in Gurgaon. So similarly, I think with EB-5, again, going back to the regulatory framework, I think that's a good investor protection measure that everybody should be, using.
So, but on another note, please don't think of buying anything on Golf Course Road in Gurgaon. When it rains, you are drowned. Okay, you have expensive
I
cars.
know. Well, I guess if you're drowning in money, you don't mind being drowned.
Trust me, that is the investment advice I would like to stay away from. But Vivek, thank you so much for your time. This was really
Thank
insightful.
you.
I hope the viewers who are looking to invest in the US through EB5 get a fair share of idea after hearing this conversation. This was really insightful. Thank you. Thank you so much for watching and tuning in to Why Not Mint Money. I, along with my team, shall see you on the next episode. Shabba khair.